When we talk about success, especially in the startup world or even just with big ambitious projects, it's easy to get caught up in the obvious stuff, right? Like the brilliant idea or the flawless product.
Right, the shiny stuff.
But what if there's something deeper going on, something more about the person behind it all? That's what we're going to be diving deep into today, those hidden advantages you might have without even realizing it.
And we got a ton of cool stuff to share, like stories that will make you rethink what success really means, and some really useful frameworks to help you spot those often invisible advantages you might already have.
And, a lot of this is going to be inspired by a book called The Unfair Advantage, How You Already Have What It Takes to Succeed by Ashali and Hassan Kupa.
A book that really turns the whole success equation on its head, basically saying, look inside yourself first. Don't
Exactly.
just focus on external factors.
And that's what we're going to try and unpack today, help you, our listener, figure out those strengths you might not even know you have.
So to kind of kick things off, let's picture two totally different starting points, right? First, Evan Spiegel, the co-founder of Snapchat.
Okay?
So this is a guy who starts life in a multi-million-dollar home, attends an exclusive private school, rubs shoulders with future celebrities, gets top-tier tutoring the works.
Wow.
His parents, both high-powered lawyers with connections that just open doors, like to venture capitalists like Peter Wendell and tech giants like Eric Schmidt.
Pretty different from most people's starting point.
Totally different.
Yeah, let's contract that with Ash Ali, one of the authors of the book we're discussing. He grew up in a really tough neighborhood in Birmingham. Crime, poverty, immigrant parents, zero connections to wealth or influence.
Night and day, right?
It is.
So you see these two guys, and it makes you question the whole idea of what you need for success. I mean, on the surface, Spiegel's got this massive head start.
Right, but what this book argues and what we really want to explore today is that success isn't just about those obvious privileges. It's about uncovering those unfair advantages you already possess regardless of your background.
And that's the mission here today, to help you identify and really use them to your advantage.
Okay, so let's dig deeper into this whole unfair advantage idea, because it's not just about being born with a silver spoon, right? The book really emphasizes that these advantages can be found in all sorts of unexpected places.
Absolutely. And it's interesting the authors share how this idea really resonated with a wide range of people, not just aspiring entrepreneurs, but also seasoned business owners and even investors.
Hmm.
They all seem to understand intuitively the importance of recognizing and harnessing these inherent advantages, both in themselves and in others.
And when you look closer at Evan Spiegel's early life, the advantages are almost overwhelming. You've got the multi-million-dollar household, the ultra-selective Crossroads School in L.A., which, fun fact, also boasts the co-founder of Tinder and tons of Hollywood A-listers among its alumni.
Wow.
And then you've got access to private tutors costing hundreds of dollars an hour, plus the family connections are mind-blowing.
Yeah. His dad's legal career, his ties to Stanford, both as an alum and a major donor, basically paved the way for his admission.
Oh, yeah.
And then the introductions to Peter Wendell, a top venture capitalist who then connects him to guys like Eric Schmidt from Google and Chad Hurley from YouTube. That's a network most people spend their entire lives trying to build.
Right, and it's not just the connections themselves, it's the early exposure to that world. Eric Schmidt actually commented on Spiegel's sophisticated manners and the business insights he picked up just from listening in on his dad's legal calls.
Wow.
So it's like he was already immersed in that world from a very young age.
It's like he had a head start before the race even began.
Exactly. And then you have Ash Ali's story, a complete contrast, growing up surrounded by gangs, drug dealing, even witnessing a murder right outside his home.
Yeah.
It's a world where the markers of wealth were things like expensive cars driven by people involved in illegal activities.
Right. A very different kind of network.
Not exactly the kind of professional connections Spiegel was born into.
Not at all. It really highlights the massive inequality that exists.
It does, and it's interesting, even someone like Evan Spiegel seems to acknowledge the role his background played. He's been quoted saying, "I got really, really lucky, and life isn't fair." That simple acknowledgement, life isn't fair, is pretty powerful.
It is. And the more you learn about successful people, the more you realize that they often admit that there were factors beyond just hard work that contributed to their success.
Right?
There's this great quote in the book from a highly successful individual who, when asked about their secret, simply said, "The answer is massively both." Of course, talking about the combination of luck and hard work.
It's a refreshing perspective for sure.
It is.
Okay, so we've seen these two contrasting starting points. But how do we as individuals actually start to figure out our own unfair advantages? That's where the Miles framework comes in, right?
Exactly. Ali and Kuba introduced this framework as a practical tool to categorize and understand your own unique set of advantages. It really encourages you to think beyond just your bank account.
So MILE stands for Mindset, Intelligence, Location, Education, and Expertise and Status. And while money is definitely an advantage, the framework pushes us to look beyond just financial factors. So let's break it down, starting with mindset.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about that?
So mindset is absolutely key, and the book really stresses the importance of what they call a reality growth mindset. It's all about finding that balance between having ambitious goals and a strong belief in yourself while also being realistic about your current situation.
So it's not just about saying the sky's the limit without acknowledging where you are right now.
Exactly, because that kind of blind optimism can actually lead to disappointment and frustration when you hit those inevitable roadblocks.
Right, you got to be grounded.
You do. It's about having that drive, but also the practicality to overcome challenges. And of course, grit and perseverance are essential, being able to push through even when things get tough.
And we see that resilience in both Evan Spiegel and Ashley's stories, right?
Totally, although it manifests in different ways.
Right, Spiegel had to deal with the pressures of scaling a massive tech company, while Ash had to overcome poverty and social barriers just to get started.
Exactly, and we can't forget about motivation. The book talks about the difference between away from pain motivation, like Ash's desire to escape his environment, and towards pleasure motivation, like Hassan's drive for freedom and autonomy in his work.
Both incredibly powerful forces.
They are.
Okay, so let's move on to intelligence. And just to be clear, this isn't about your IQ score, right?
No, not at all.
That's a pretty common misconception.
It is. The book challenges the idea that IQ is the only measure of intelligence. What matters more, especially in entrepreneurship, are things like social and emotional intelligence,
Okay.
your ability to understand and connect with people, and of course, creativity and self-awareness are also crucial.
So running a business isn't just about being book smart.
Exactly. It's more about how you use your intelligence in the real world.
The book actually makes a distinction between book smarts, that theoretical knowledge from formal education, and the practical understanding someone like Ash developed through self-directed learner. He was a Y learner, meaning he needed to see the real-world application of knowledge to really grasp it.
Yeah, and think about yourself for a second. How do you learn best?
Good question.
Is it through structured courses or by diving in and figuring things out as you go?
Right.
Ash didn't do well in traditional schooling, but when he had a goal building his online shoe business, he became this incredibly focused learner, soaking up everything about coding and e-commerce.
That's awesome.
It is. And then there's street smarts, those essential people skills, emotional intelligence, common sense, and that ability to spot when someone's not being totally straight with you.
Yeah, that's huge in business, right?
Oh, absolutely. You need that for negotiations, building relationships, avoiding pitfalls. Think about it. Have you ever had that gut feeling about someone in a deal? That's often your street smarts kicking in.
Right, trusting your intuition.
Exactly. And then let's not forget about creative intelligence, that ability to connect ideas from different fields, that kind of cross-disciplinary thinking that sparks innovation.
Okay, so now location. This one might seem pretty straightforward, but I bet there's more to it than just where you live, right?
Way more. Location can be a huge unfair advantage, and this idea of clustering is really important. It's the tendency for businesses in the same industry to group together geographically.
Like Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Silicon Valley is the perfect example. It's got this incredible concentration of talent capital and resources, creating a kind of self-perpetuating cycle of success.
So you've got top universities like Stanford churning out brilliant minds, venture capitalists, setting up shop, a highly skilled workforce, and this constant influx of people and ideas.
Exactly. The book mentions Professor Frederick Terman, who played a key role in nurturing this ecosystem. And even seemingly random events like William Shockey's decision to move there had massive ripple effects.
Right.
And to this day, a huge chunk of U.S. venture capital investment is concentrated in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
It really is, but it's not just Silicon Valley. The UK has its own thriving startup hubs, like Silicon Roundabout in London and Silicon Fed in Cambridge, often centered around prestigious universities.
Okay.
Being in these hubs gives you access to investors, a skilled workforce, knowledge sharing, and the infrastructure you need. Of course, there are downsides too, like crazy high operating costs, which can sometimes push companies to relocate.
Right, it's all about weighing the pros and cons.
It is.
The book also had some fascinating examples of how location has been used strategically. James Cohen, for instance, purposely chose a fancy Mayfair address for his early business, even though their actual office was tiny, just to project an image of success and credibility.
That's brilliant, really playing the status game.
And then you've got Huda Kattan of Huda Beauty. She made a strategic move to Dubai to be closer to her target market and tap into the unique beauty trends of the Middle East.
Smart move.
It was her earlier experiences attending makeup school in LA and working with celebrities definitely helped build her expertise, but that geographical shift was a key part of her brand's incredible growth.
For sure.
Even giants like Amazon made really calculated location decisions early on. Jeff Bezos famously chose Seattle for its access to engineering talent from Microsoft favorable tax regulations and proximity to book distribution warehouses.
Interesting.
It was all very strategic.
It was, but it's also important to remember you don't necessarily need to be in a traditional startup hub to succeed. Take Basecamp, for example. They built a hugely successful software company with a mostly remote workforce, intentionally choosing to operate outside the hyper-competitive Silicon Valley bubble.
Okay, so location can be a significant advantage.
Totally, but it's not the only path.
Right, okay. Let's talk about luck and timing. This one can feel like it's completely out of our control, but the book seems to suggest there might be more to it than just random chance.
Absolutely. Timing is often way more critical than we realize. Bill Gross's research at Idealab actually found that timing was the #1 factor in startup success,
Wow.
accounting for a whopping 42%. He analyzed both successful and failed startups and found that, surprisingly, the core idea itself ranked last in importance.
Wow, so timing really sucks the idea itself.
In many cases, yes. Think about early search engines like Go2.com, which later became Orphature and then Google. They both really benefited from entering the market at just the right time.
Okay.
And the book talks about the dangers of being either too early, having to educate an unready market, or too late when the market's already saturated. The sweet spot is finding a small but rapidly growing market segment.
So it's about being in the right place at the right time.
It is, but here's where things get really interesting. Dr. Richard Wiseman's research suggests that our mindsets can actually influence how we experience and interact with luck.
Really?
Yeah, people who consider themselves lucky tend to be more open to new experiences and more likely to notice and grab unexpected opportunities. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So if you think you're lucky, you're more likely to spot those lucky breaks.
Exactly. And then you have Will Shu's story with Deliveroo. He actually came up with the idea way back in 2004, but didn't launch until 2013 when smartphones, GPS technology, and affordable delivery options were all in place.
So he waited for the right moment.
He did, and his initial focus on partnering with high-end restaurants in wealthier areas like Chelsea was also a strategic timing decision.
So even with a great idea, the external environment has to be ready for it to really take off.
Exactly, and the book contrasts this with a story about two people, Martin and Brenda. They both come across the same opportunity, but Martin seizes it, networks, makes connections, while Brenda hesitates and misses out completely.
So it's not just about luck, it's about being ready and willing to act when opportunity knocks.
Exactly. You got to be proactive.
Okay, let's move on to education and expertise. Now, this is a category where I think the book takes a really broad and refreshing view. It's not just about formal degrees, right?
Absolutely. While traditional schooling definitely has its place, the book emphasizes lifelong learning and skill development regardless of where that learning happens. The fact that companies like Apple and Google are dropping degree requirements for certain roles speaks volumes about this shift.
It does.
The thank you belongs to those who are constantly learning and adapting, picking up new skills, whether that's through university or independent learning.
And Ashali's own journey is a great example. He didn't thrive in traditional academics, but became incredibly successful through self-directed learning because he was a Y learner. He was super effective at acquiring the knowledge he needed when he needed it.
For sure.
It's like he was learning with a purpose.
Exactly. So think about your own learning style. Do you excel in a classroom setting, or do you learn best by tackling real-world problems?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is. Now, while Ash's story highlights the power of alternative education, the book also acknowledges that most successful businesses are actually founded by university graduates.
Interesting.
A good formal education can offer three main advantages: a solid knowledge base, a valuable professional network, and what's called signaling that credibility boost that a degree can sometimes give you. The book even mentions the high number of successful entrepreneurs who went to private schools, suggesting that early networking and access can be a big advantage.
But I guess the main takeaway is that it's the quality of the education and expertise you acquire that matters most?
Absolutely. Not necessarily how you get there.
Right. The Google founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they leveraged their computer science expertise to create a better search engine based on his key insight.
Exactly. And developing expertise in a high-demand field can be a huge unfair advantage, even without formal qualifications.
Makes sense.
The book offers some practical tips on how to gain that expertise through reading books, finding mentors, taking online courses, attending evening classes.
All great options?
They are. So what skills are you actively developing right now?
Yeah, good question.
It is.
Okay, last but not least, status. Now, this is about more than just your social standing, right?
Right. It's about your personal brand, how others perceive you, your credibility. It's multifaceted, influenced by everything from your appearance and perceived age to your track record and the strength of your network. The book actually mentions a study by the Social Mobility Commission where something as simple as wearing brown shoes negatively impacted job prospects in investment banking.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah, it just shows how these unspoken status codes exist in different industries.
It's crazy how those little things can matter.
They do. And social capital, the quality of your network, is a huge part of your overall status. As the book points out, Ash built his status through demonstrating his expertise. James Canarian strategically used location to enhance his perceived status early on. And the Collison brothers of Stripe, even though they dropped out of university, initially benefited from the status associated with their elite education.
So different paths to building status.
Exactly. And then you have someone like Kylie Jenner, who masterfully leveraged her social media fame to launch Kylie Cosmetics with phenomenal success.
Right.
And then there's cultural capital, your understanding of and ability to navigate different social and professional environments. Think about the unspoken rules of dress code in banking versus Silicon Valley, or how age is perceived differently in various industries.
Right, like what's considered young or old varies wildly depending on the field.
Exactly. The book shares Patrick Collison's perspective that entrepreneurship felt normal to him because his parents were entrepreneurs. That's cultural capital in action. And then there's Tristan Walker's experience at boarding school, which exposed him to a different world, giving him that privilege of possibility.
That's interesting.
It is. So think about the subcultures you're a part of and how they give you a unique understanding or perspective.
Okay, so we've broken down the Miles framework. Now, how do we actually take these unfair advantages and apply them to building a business or launching a project?
Well, the book emphasizes starting small and minimizing risk, what they call growth scrapping, whether you're aiming for a lifestyle business or a high-growth company.
Okay.
The key in the early stages is to talk to your customers and build what's called a minimum viable product, or MVP, basically the simplest version of your idea that still solves a problem.
So it doesn't have to be perfect, just functional.
Exactly. That aligns with Paul Graham's famous advice to do things that don't scale early on. Focus on those manual one-on-one interactions to really understand your customers' needs. Experimentation and growth hacking come later once you've found that product market fit.
Okay.
And when it comes to funding, the book outlines the different stages from friends and family to angel investors, VCs, private equity, and eventually maybe an IPO. For those considering angel or VC funding, it highlights the key things investors look at: the team, early traction growth, potential market size, and of course your unfair advantage, often viewed through the Miles framework.
So it all comes back to Miles.
It does.
Okay, so let's talk about a real-world example. Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva. She's someone who really leveraged her unfair advantages. She came from a middle-class background, had a supportive family, was intelligent, and had some luck along the way. Her early experience with Fusion Books, a smaller lifestyle business, gave her valuable education and expertise in design software.
Makes sense.
But her real advantage was her deep understanding of the frustrations people had with existing design tools. Her persistence and hustle, even learning to kitesurf to network, eventually paid off, and she secured investment and built a hugely successful company.
It's inspiring, right?
It is. And it's interesting to hear the authors reflect on their own journeys. Ash talks about his lack of entitlement, the creativity he developed from having limited resources, his street smarts, his move to London, and how he built his status through demonstrating expertise.
Right.
And Hassan points to having enough financial security to invest in his education, his academic abilities, his location, the timing of meeting Ash, and his proactive networking. So different, but both successful.
Exactly. And that's the point. Everyone has their own unique set of unfair advantages.
So the key takeaway here is that everyone has unfair advantages. The key is learning to identify them.
Exactly. We really encourage you, our listener, to take some time after this to think about your own miles, your mindset, your different types of intelligence, your location, your education expertise, and your status.
Right. What are those strengths and circumstances that make you you?
Exactly. And once you've figured those out, think about how you can use them in your projects, your career, or whatever you aspire to do.
This has been a really fascinating look at a powerful framework. Now for a final thought, something to ponder: what seemingly ordinary aspect of your life could actually be your hidden rocket ship?
That's a great question to think about. You can continue this conversation and connect with the authors Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba on Twitter at Ash Ali and at Start of Hassan. You can also find more of their insights by joining their mailing list.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.